Code.org's lesson 14 is called Conditionals. In our prior unit in my class, we've ran into these before. A conditional statement is merely an if statement in programming, so it allows your program to make decisions. If this is true, then do this. If it's not true, then do that. Okay? The focus that I want to have in this video is on the JavaScript, okay? Because when we were doing block-based coding, you already learned how to deal with conditional statements, and you understand the concept. What's interesting about JavaScript is I'm going to add a couple new vocab words here, and right away Code.org gets into that. They have what's called a boolean expression. Now, a boolean is a data type. We so far have only used two data types in JavaScript. The first one that we started using was numbers, so you can store a number inside of a variable. We've also used strings, and you put quotes around some text, and now that's a string, and you can store that in a variable. Well, a Boolean is it's not a number, it's not a string, it's its own data type, and a Boolean can either be true or false. So I could say, create a variable, and that variable could be, I don't know, the letter F, right? Let F equal, and I could say true or false, and then F would be a Boolean. Now, a Boolean expression is any expression in JavaScript that evaluates to a Boolean value, either true or false. And we see three examples of those right away in this bubble. Now, what makes this a Boolean expression is that you're comparing two things, okay? This double equals sign, that's the weak equality comparison operator in JavaScript. It just looks at both sides and says, hey, are these equal? Ask yourself for a moment, why don't they use the single equals sign? That means something different in JavaScript, doesn't it? So we need a different type of equality operator. So this double equals sign in JavaScript is the closest thing that we've ran into so far that looks like your math class, that looks like algebra. This is not the assignment operator. This is checking for equality. Down below we have a greater than or a less than. So these three things are all called comparison operators because we're comparing. And the moment JavaScript sees one of those, it says, hey, I need to evaluate this and check, is this true or false? So right here, what I'm highlighting, this is a Boolean expression. Does sprite 1's y property equal sprite 2's y property? Well, look up here. Here's sprite 1's y property, and here's sprite 2's y property, and they are equal. So I would expect line 5 to evaluate to true. So what will happen is JavaScript will change that to the true value, and then console log will spit out true. Not the string true, the actual internal Boolean value true. Hard to get over that concept sometimes. Okay, second one. Is the x property of sprite 1 greater than the x property of sprite 2? Well, sprite 1 is 100 on x and sprite 2 is 300 on x, so this, I believe, is false. We're going to double check that. Finally, is the x value of sprite 1 lesser than the y value of sprite 2? Here's the x value of sprite 1. Is that less than the y value of sprite 2? Yes, it is. 100 is less than 200. So I expect true, false, true, which is letter A. Let's run it and see. And here is the console down here. When you do console log, it spits it out into the debug console, and what do you know? I got them right. True, false, true. Okay. Code.org has a very nice video about conditionals and Boolean expressions that you should watch. It's very good. Another couple lessons to check your understanding. And then here's a practice where you get to write your own console log statement with a Boolean expression inside of it. And then finally, when we get to bubble 6, that's when they actually use the keyword if. Okay? And the reason that they've held it off is because every if statement has to come with a Boolean expression to go with it. Okay? So in this case, the if shows up on line 13. And what you need to learn now that we're typing JavaScript is to learn how to type your own if statements. Now, lines 13 through 15, that is the whole if statement. It's kind of like a function or a loop, right? You got to use curly braces to show it where the beginning and the end of the whole thing is. Now, this whole thing has its own name. This is called a conditional statement, or just a conditional. So lines 13 through 15 are the conditional here. And the reason it's called a conditional is because it's testing this condition. This condition asks, is the X property of the race car less than 100? Right? If that condition is true, then we're going to execute whatever's in the curly braces. If it's not true, we're going to skip past the curly braces and go to the next line of code after the conditional. Okay? You'll notice that a condition is really the same thing as a Boolean expression. It is. Yeah, technically, it's a condition when it's a Boolean expression that's part of a conditional. So a little vocab nitpicking there. But they're basically the same thing. A condition is a Boolean expression, right? It tests a condition. Okay, let's check if this is going to run. If race car X is less than 100, well, right up on line 12, we're setting race car X to itself minus 2, and that is in the draw loop. So as this animation is going to run, the X property of the race car is constantly changing. Now the X property of the race car starts at 400. So what that means is that's going to keep going down, down, down every frame of the animation. And at some point, that X value is going to be less than 100. As soon as that happens, I expect the console to suddenly spit out winner. Let's see it. Is this a prediction exercise? It is. Okay. Once race car X is less than 100, let's try it. Nothing, nothing, nothing on the console. The moment it hits 100, boom, the console pops up. You'll notice it doesn't just console log winner once. Okay, it logged it hundreds of times. Look at all this I'm scrolling up through. That's because this console log statement is in the draw loop. Okay, every frame of the animation, it's rechecking this condition. And every new frame of the animation, the X value of the car is still less than 100, so it's going to run that console log statement again every frame. Okay, so those are the basics. A couple notes on syntax here. There's no semicolon at the end of line 15, just like there's no semicolon at the end of line 18 at the end of this draw block. Right? When you have two curly braces that hold a chunk of code, that's called a block. You do not need a semicolon at the end of a block. So the statements inside the block, though, that's different. That needs a semicolon, okay? I think that's all I need to teach you. The rest of this is going to be, just read it and practice so that you get the practice you need writing conditionals in JavaScript. Have fun. Conditionals really open up a lot of power in your programming.